I always thought my grandma's house was the safest place in the world. It sat at the edge of a quiet little town in Ohio, painted pale blue with white shutters and a wraparound porch where she used to drink her sweet tea while humming old country songs. Every summer since I was a kid, I'd pack a small suitcase, and my mom would drive me out there to stay for weeks at a time. Those summers became the backdrop of my childhood. Grandma's kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls in the morning and fried chicken at night. She told the best stories, too, stories about when she was young, about how she grew up during times that seemed like a different planet compared to my own world of cell phones and social media. She always had this twinkle in her eye, like she knew more than she let on. But there was one rule. One strange, unshakable rule. I was never allowed in the attic. The attic door was at the very end of the upstairs hallway, tucked behind a worn floral curtain that didn't quite hide its presence. It had a big, old-fashioned lock on it, the kind you might see in a mystery movie. Every time I passed it, I felt like it was watching me, like it held some secret too heavy to be spoken out loud. The first time I asked about it, I was 9 years old. "Grandma, what's up there?" I said, pointing toward the door. Her face instantly changed. The warmth in her eyes flickered out for just a second, replaced by something I didn't recognize, fear. She reached out, rested her hand on my shoulder, and shook her head. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. That attic's been locked for years. Too many old boxes, too much dust. Dangerous place for kids." But I didn't believe her. Not really. Grandma wasn't the type of woman to get rattled over some cobwebs. I remember the way her voice trembled, even though she tried to sound casual. And from that day on, it was like the attic became a shadow over every summer I spent there. When I grew older, around 13 or 14, I got bolder. I asked her again. "Seriously, Grandma, why can't I go up there? You're acting like it's haunted or something." She set down her teacup a little too quickly, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Promise me you'll never open that door," she said, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard. "Promise me, no matter what happens, you'll leave that attic alone." I promised. But inside, I was dying to know. Even after I left for high school, every summer when I came back, I felt the weight of that door. Sometimes at night, lying awake in the guest room, I swore I could hear faint noises from above, the creak of wood, the sound of something shifting. I convinced myself it was just old beams settling, or maybe a raccoon that had found its way inside. But deep down, I wondered if the attic was alive in its own way, breathing with secrets that no one wanted to uncover. The years went by, and my curiosity only grew stronger. But I kept my word to her. I never touched the lock, not while she was alive. Then one winter evening, everything changed. I was 17 when Mom got the call. I remember her gripping the phone, so tight her knuckles turned white. Her voice broke as she whispered, "She's gone." Grandma had passed away quietly in her sleep. No warning, no goodbyes. Just gone. The funeral was small. A few relatives I hadn't seen in years showed up, offering condolences that felt rehearsed. My mom cried harder than I'd ever seen, clutching my hands so tightly that I thought her grief might swallow both of us whole. But in the middle of all that pain, I kept thinking about that house, about the attic. When Mom told me we'd be spending a few days there to sort through Grandma's belongings, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was like fate was pulling me back to that locked door. I didn't say anything, though. I just nodded. The first night back at Grandma's house felt unreal. Everything looked the same. The rocking chair still sat on the porch, her glasses rested neatly on the kitchen counter, and the faint smell of cinnamon lingered in the air, like she'd only stepped out for a moment. But she wasn't there. The house was quieter than I'd ever known it, too still, almost suffocating. As I walked through the upstairs hallway, my gaze landed on the attic door. The floral curtain still hung in front of it, but this time, I noticed something new. The lock was slightly ajar. I froze. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. All those years of warnings, all those promises I made. And now the door seemed to be calling me, daring me to break every rule. I didn't open it that night. I couldn't. My mom was downstairs, and I wasn't ready. But I barely slept. All I could think about was what might be waiting for me up there. The next morning, Mom handed me a list of things to pack up: clothes, jewelry, family photos. I nodded, but the whole time, my eyes kept flicking toward the stairs. The attic felt like a storm cloud hanging above us, heavy and inevitable. By the third day, I couldn't resist anymore. That evening, after Mom went to bed, I crept upstairs. My hands shook as I pushed aside the curtain, revealing the old wooden door. The lock was rusted, fragile from years of wear, but it turned easily under my grip. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the door, my breath caught in my throat. I thought about Grandma's voice, the way she begged me to stay away, the fear in her eyes every time I asked. My chest tightened with guilt, but I pushed it open anyway. The door groaned on its hinges, and the smell of dust and age hit me like a wave. The air was heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. I pulled the string of a single dangling light bulb, and the attic flickered into view. Boxes. Dozens of them. Old furniture, covered in sheets. Stacks of photo albums, trunks lined up against the far wall. And something else. In the corner, half hidden under a moth-eaten quilt, sat a small wooden chest. Unlike the other clutter, it looked deliberate, placed there with care. My pulse quickened as I walked toward it. The closer I got, the more I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me, like I was crossing into a world I wasn't supposed to enter. I knelt down, brushed away the dust, and lifted the lid. Inside, neatly arranged, were letters. Dozens of them, tied with ribbon, yellowed with age. Some were addressed to my grandma. Some were written by her. And some were addressed to people I'd never heard of before. On top of the stack was a single black and white photograph. It showed a young woman standing in front of the very house I was in, her face eerily familiar. I froze. My breath hitched in my chest. Because the woman in the photo looked exactly like my mom. But the date scribbled on the back was 20 years before my mom was even born. I sat frozen on the wooden attic floor, the photograph trembling in my hands. The young woman's face stared back at me like some kind of ghost. Her hair fell in soft curls, her smile faint but deliberate, and her eyes, those eyes were hauntingly familiar. They were my mother's eyes. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was just a distant relative who happened to look like her. Families sometimes shared uncanny resemblances, right? But the longer I stared, the less I could deny it. The jawline, the curve of the lips, the same determined tilt of her chin, it wasn't just a resemblance. It was almost identical. My hands shook as I flipped the photo over again, rereading the faint pencil marks on the back. June, 1954. But my mom wasn't even born until 1976. How could this be possible? A chill ran through me, but curiosity burned stronger than fear. I set the photo down carefully and untied the ribbon around the stack of letters. My fingers were clumsy because my pulse was racing so hard it felt like thunder in my veins. The first letter was written in neat cursive, dated 1955. It was addressed to someone named Anna. My stomach dropped. My mom's name was Anna. But the words on the page told a story that didn't fit anything I'd ever been told. Dearest Anna, I pray you are safe tonight. The choices we made will haunt us forever. But I believe one day the truth must be known. No one deserves to live in shadows. I read the lines over and over, my mind spinning. Who was this Anna? And what choices had been made that were so terrible they had to be hidden for decades? The next letter only deepened the mystery. The child must never know. It's too dangerous. Promise me you'll keep her away from all of this. She deserves a normal life, free from what we've done. I dropped the paper as though it had burned me. The child. Were they talking about my mom? Or me? The attic felt suddenly claustrophobic, like the walls were closing in. Dust swirled in the air, and the single bulb above me flickered faintly. My head spun with questions I couldn't answer. I dug deeper into the chest, searching for something, anything, that could explain what I was reading. There were dozens of letters, each one more cryptic than the last. Some were signed with initials, some with no names at all. But one envelope caught my eye. Unlike the others, it wasn't yellowed with age. The paper was newer, the handwriting shaky but unmistakable. It was my grandma's handwriting, and it was addressed to me. My throat tightened as I carefully unfolded the letter. To my dearest grandchild, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to stop you. I know your curiosity has always been strong, and I can only hope you will forgive me for the years I spent keeping you away from the attic. Everything I did was to protect you, to protect your mother. But secrets don't stay buried forever, no matter how hard we try. There are truths about this family that I could never bring myself to speak aloud. I pray you have the strength to face them now, even if they break your heart. Tears blurred my vision. My grandma had written this for me. She had known, all along, that one day I would come up here. She had planned for it. But what was she trying to protect me from? I clutched the letter to my chest and tried to steady my breathing. A part of me wanted to shove everything back into the chest, lock the attic, and never look back. Pretend none of this existed. But I couldn't. Not after reading her words. I needed to know. So I pulled out more letters. Piece by piece, the story began to form, like fragments of a shattered mirror. There was mention of a fire. A tragedy that had happened decades ago in the very town my grandma lived in. A family torn apart, names whispered but never fully revealed. And at the center of it all was this mysterious Anna who looked exactly like my mom. The letters hinted at a child who was taken in secretly, raised under a new name to hide from some kind of danger. One letter even said, "If the past ever catches up, we'll lose everything. Promise me the attic stays locked. Promise me she never knows." The words struck me like lightning. Suddenly, my grandma's rule made sense in the most chilling way. The attic wasn't just filled with dust and boxes. It was filled with the truth she had spent her entire life hiding. And that truth was tied directly to my mom. I sat there for hours, piecing through the fragments, until the floor around me was littered with envelopes and photographs. My eyes stung from reading, my hands sore from rifling through the delicate pages. And yet, for all the clues I found, there were still more questions than answers. Who was the woman in the photograph? Was she my mom, or someone else who just happened to look like her? What was the tragedy everyone kept referring to? Why had Grandma dedicated her life to keeping it a secret? By the time I finally stood, my legs were stiff, my heart heavy. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. That night, I sat in the guest room staring at the photo, the letter addressed to me resting on my lap. My mom was downstairs, asleep in the very house where these secrets had been buried. I thought about waking her, about showing her everything right then and there. But fear stopped me. What if she already knew? What if she was part of the secret? The thought twisted my stomach into knots. I lay awake until dawn, my mind racing with every possibility. When the first rays of light slipped through the curtains, I made a decision. I couldn't just sit here, drowning in questions. I had to confront her. I had to know the truth, even if it destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. The next morning, as my mom sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee, I walked in with the photo in my hand. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling. "Who is this woman?" Her eyes flicked to the photo, and for the briefest moment, I saw it. The recognition. The fear. Her hand shook as she set her mug down. "Where did you get that?" "In the attic," I whispered. "Grandma left me a letter. She said there were things I needed to know." Silence filled the room like a heavy fog. My mom's eyes glistened with tears. She tried to blink away. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, brush it off like some old family relic that didn't matter. But then she whispered, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." Her words shattered me. Because in that single moment, I realized she did know. she had always known. And the secret she had carried all these years was about to come crashing down on both of us. The kitchen suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. The ticking clock on the wall, the smell of coffee lingering in the air, even the creak of the wooden chair beneath me, it all felt distant, unreal. My mom sat across from me, her shoulders tense, her fingers clutching the edge of the table as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," she whispered again, her voice fragile, barely audible. I clenched the photograph in my hand. Then how was I supposed to find out? Were you ever going to tell me? Or was this supposed to stay a secret forever? Her eyes flickered toward me, then down to her coffee mug as if she couldn't bear the weight of my gaze. For a long moment, she didn't speak. I could see the battle in her face, fear, guilt, love, shame, all colliding in ways I had never seen from her before. Finally, she let out a long, shaky breath. That woman. Her name was also Anna. She was my mother. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. I blinked, my mind spinning. Your mother? But what do you mean? I thought Grandma was your mom. She raised you. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for the photograph. Her fingers brushed against mine, cold and unsteady. She studied the face in the picture like it was a wound that never healed. "She did raise me," she said softly. "But she wasn't my mother. She was my aunt. She took me in after everything fell apart. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My grandma, who I had trusted more than anyone, had lied my whole life. She wasn't even really my grandmother." I could barely breathe. "So the woman in this photo, the one who looks exactly like you, she's your real mom?" "My real grandma?" Mom nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes. Her name was Anna May. And she died when I was very young. At least, that's what I was told. But the truth is more complicated than that." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed her palms against her face. I sat there, stunned, my chest tight with anger and confusion. "All these years," I whispered, "you let me believe a lie." Her hands dropped, and her eyes finally met mine. They were glassy, filled with desperation. "I didn't want this for you. I didn't want you to grow up carrying the weight of a past that could destroy you. That's why I never told you. That's why Mom, your great aunt, kept the attic locked. We thought if we buried it deep enough, it would stay buried. But it didn't." I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "It's all up there in that attic. The letters, the photos, the secrets. You tried to hide it, but it's still here. It's still haunting us." Her shoulders sagged as though my words crushed her. She nodded slowly, as if she knew I was right but couldn't bring herself to admit it aloud. I pushed the photograph toward her. "Then tell me the truth. Everything. No more lies. Who is Anna May? What happened to her? What happened to this family?" Mom stared at the photo for a long time, her thumb gently tracing the outline of the young woman's face. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, like she was reaching back into a part of herself she had tried to seal away forever. "My mother, Anna May, was only 17 when she had me," she began. "Back then, in the 1950s, it was scandalous. She was just a girl, bright, full of dreams, but she fell in love with the wrong boy. His name was Daniel, and his family didn't approve of her. When she got pregnant, they cast her out. She had nowhere to go. My aunt, your grandmother, the woman you knew, was the only one who stood by her." My chest tightened as I listened, picturing this girl who looked just like my mom, abandoned and alone, carrying a child the world didn't want her to have. "She gave birth to me in secret," Mom continued, her voice trembling. "But life wasn't kind to her. She was so young, so overwhelmed. She struggled to care for me, and the town judged her harshly. Whispers followed her everywhere. They called me a bastard child. They treated her like she was ruined. And then, something happened. Something that changed everything." She paused, her lips trembling, and I leaned in closer, my heart pounding. What happened? Her eyes flicked up to mine, haunted. There was a fire. Late one night, when I was only 2 years old, my mother's small house caught fire. To this day, no one knows how it started. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered it was arson, that someone wanted her gone. All I know is that she never came out. They told me she died in that fire. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to imagine the woman in the photograph, so full of life, consumed by flames while my mom was just a baby. It felt unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But you survived, I said quietly. She nodded. Your grandma, my aunt, was the one who pulled me out. She raised me as her own from that day forward. She made me promise never to tell anyone the truth about Anna May. She said it was safer that way, that people in this town would never let us live it down if they knew the full story. So she became my mother, and I grew up pretending the woman in the photo never existed. Tears blurred my vision. So my whole life, you let me believe she was my grandma, when really she was my great aunt. And my real grandma. She died before I ever got the chance to meet her. Mom's tears spilled over, and she reached for my hand. I wanted to tell you so many times. But every time I thought about it, I heard her voice, your grandma's voice, telling me to protect you, to keep you away from the shadows. I thought I was doing the right thing. I pulled my hand back, my heart aching. But you weren't. You were lying to me. Both of you were. And now I don't even know who I am anymore. The room went silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. My mom's face crumpled, and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I wanted to be angry, but seeing her like that, broken, raw, it tore at me. Still, questions burned inside me, refusing to die down. The letters in the attic weren't just about a fire or a secret child. They hinted at something darker, choices that haunted people, promises made in fear. There's more, isn't there? I asked, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. The letters talked about danger, about someone not supposed to know. What aren't you telling me? Her shoulders stiffened, and she looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, that she might shut down completely. Then she whispered, the fire wasn't an accident, and the person responsible was someone in our family. Her words hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. The fire wasn't an accident, and the person responsible was someone in our family. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What are you talking about? I whispered, though a part of me wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee mug, but she didn't lift it. Instead, she wrapped both hands around it like she was desperate for warmth. You have to understand, she began, her voice quivering. Families back then, they cared about appearances more than anything else. Reputation was everything. And my mother, Anna May, her pregnancy was considered shameful. People whispered about her everywhere she went. Her own parents, my grandparents, were furious. They thought she ruined the family name. I swallowed hard. So, you're saying your grandparents, my great-grandparents, hated her for having you? She nodded, her eyes filled with pain. Yes. They didn't just disapprove. They treated her like she was dirty, like she had committed an unforgivable sin. They wanted her to give me away. But she refused. She loved me. I may have been born in secret, but I was her whole world. Her voice cracked on those words, and I could see the little girl she once was, the child who clung to her mother while the world judged them. I leaned forward. Then who set the fire? Mom hesitated, her throat working like the words were poison she couldn't swallow. It was my grandfather. Your great-grandfather. The room tilted around me. No, I said, shaking my head. No, that's not possible. Families don't. They don't kill their own. But the look in her eyes told me otherwise. He didn't mean to kill her, Mom said quickly, tears spilling down her cheeks. At least, that's what your grandma believed. She always said he just wanted to scare her, to force her to leave town. to give me up so the shame would disappear. But the fire spread too fast. It got out of control. And her voice broke and she pressed a hand to her mouth. She never made it out. I felt sick. My great-grandfather, a man I had never met but whose name hung on faded family photos downstairs, had set the fire that killed my real grandmother. The world suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. I could barely process it. So, Grandma, your aunt, she knew? She knew what happened. Mom nodded. She was there that night. She pulled me out of the burning house. And when she realized what had really happened, she confronted him. But he swore her to silence. He said if she ever told anyone, if she ever breathed a word, he would make sure both of us disappeared too. She believed him. She had no choice. So she raised me as her own daughter, told everyone she had taken me in after a tragedy. And the truth was buried with the ashes. I sat back in my chair, my hands clutching the photographs so tightly the edges bent. My heart hurt in ways I couldn't describe. The woman in the picture, Anna May, had been erased, hidden like she was a stain instead of a person. And the man who should have protected her had destroyed her instead. But why keep it a secret for so long? I demanded, my voice shaking. He's dead now, isn't he? What was the point of hiding it from me? Mom's face twisted with guilt. Because secrets have a way of poisoning everything they touch. Your grandma believed if the truth came out, it would destroy me, destroy us. She wanted me to have a chance at a normal life, not to grow up branded as the daughter of scandal, the granddaughter of a killer. And when I had you, I wanted the same thing for you. I didn't want you carrying the weight of a past you never asked for. I pressed my fists against my knees, my whole body trembling. But don't you get it? By hiding it, you did destroy us. You built our lives on lies. And now I don't know who to trust anymore. She flinched at my words, but I couldn't take them back. The anger and betrayal burned too hot. For a long time, silence filled the room. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Outside, birds chirped like the world hadn't just tilted off its axis. Finally, Mom whispered, "There's more you need to know." I stiffened. More? She nodded, her eyes red and swollen. After the fire, after I was taken in, your great-grandfather made one final demand. He said Anna May's name could never be spoken again. He told everyone she had died in a tragic accident, but he twisted the story. He told people she was careless, that she left a lamp too close to a curtain. He blamed her for the fire that killed her. He painted her as a reckless girl who paid the price for her mistakes. My stomach churned. He turned her into the villain. Yes, Mom whispered. And people believed him. They always believed the man in power. That's why your grandma locked the attic. That's why she kept the letters and the photos hidden. It was the only proof that Anna May was more than the lies they told about her. She wanted you to know one day. But not too soon. Not until you were strong enough to carry it. I thought about the chest in the attic, about the careful way the letters were tied preserved. Grandma hadn't destroyed the truth. She had protected it, waiting for me to find it. But the anger still burned. So all these years, we let his version of the story stand. We let the world believe she was careless, reckless, when really, she was murdered by her own father. Tears streamed down my mom's face, and she didn't deny it. I pushed my chair back and stood, pacing across the kitchen floor. My hands raked through my hair, my chest heaving. I felt like screaming, like ripping down the wallpaper, like tearing the whole house apart brick by brick until there was nothing left of the lies that had trapped us. Instead, I turned back to her, my voice sharp. Do you know what that means? It means our whole family history is a lie. Everything. The stories, the traditions, the pride, it's all built on covering up his crime. Mom wiped her face with the back of her hand, her shoulders trembling. I know, she said. I've lived with it my whole life. And I hated myself for passing the lie on to you. But I didn't know how else to survive. How else to keep you safe. Safe. The word echoed in my head like a cruel joke. Nothing about this felt safe. Everything felt dangerous, twisted, broken. I slumped back into my chair, my strength draining out of me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, two women bound by the same blood, drowning in the weight of the same secret. And yet, as the silence stretched, I realized something. If my grandma had left those letters for me, if she had trusted me with the truth, then maybe it wasn't meant to stay hidden anymore. Maybe it was my turn to decide what to do with it. I looked at my mom, her face pale and streaked with tears. We can't keep this buried. Not anymore. People need to know what really happened. Anna May deserves to be remembered for who she was, not erased by lies. Fear flickered in her eyes. If you tell people, they'll judge us all over again. They'll drag the past into the present. Are you ready for that? Am I? I held the photograph in my hand, tracing the woman's face with my thumb. She looked so alive, so real, like she was begging me not to let her story fade. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I'd rather face the truth than live another day in a lie. Mom's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but then she closed them again. She looked at me for a long time, her expression caught between pride and fear. Finally, she whispered, "Then you'll have to be the one to tell it." And in that moment, I realized my life had changed forever. The rest of that day felt like I was walking through fog. Every time I glanced at my mom, I saw her differently, not just as my mother, but as a daughter who had been forced to live a lie her entire life. And every time I thought about Grandma, no, my great aunt, I felt torn between love and betrayal. She had raised me with so much warmth, yet she had also carried the key to the truth in her pocket and never let me touch it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling while the shadows shifted across the walls. The attic loomed above me, heavy with its secrets. I imagined my great-grandmother, Anna May, standing in that photograph with her whole life ahead of her, only to have it stolen away by the very people who should have loved her most. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was an injustice. I thought about the whispers people must have said about her, how they probably repeated the story my great-grandfather told, that she was careless, reckless, that her own mistake cost her life. I thought about how she had been erased, replaced by silence, remembered only as a cautionary tale instead of a real person with dreams and love in her heart. By morning, my mind was made up. I couldn't let it end like this. When I walked downstairs, my mom was already at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted when she saw me. "Me neither," I said quietly. I slid into the chair across from her and placed the photograph of Anna May on the table between us. We can't keep her locked away in that attic. We can't keep pretending like she never existed. Mom's lips trembled. "If you bring this out, people will talk. They'll dig up everything. They'll drag our name through the mud all over again." "Maybe they will," I said. "But at least the truth will finally be out there. At least she'll finally be remembered for who she was, not the lies that destroyed her." She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the photo, her thumb brushing across the image like she could bring her mother back to life through touch alone. Then she whispered, "How do we even begin?" The answer came to me like it had been waiting all along. The letters. The photographs. Everything in the attic. We put it together. We write her story the way it really happened. And then, we share it. With everyone. Mom looked startled. "You mean, like a book?" I shook my head. "No, not a book. Not yet. But maybe the town's historical society. Or the local paper. Somewhere people will listen. Somewhere her name can finally be spoken without shame." For a long time, Mom was silent. I thought she might refuse, shut down the idea entirely. But then, slowly, she nodded. "If we do this, we do it together." That day, we climbed into the attic side by side. The air was thick with dust, the letters and boxes waiting exactly where I had left them. But this time, I wasn't sneaking. I wasn't breaking a promise. I was stepping into the truth willingly, carrying it with me. We spent hours going through everything. My mom read some of the letters aloud, her voice breaking as she recognized her mother's handwriting. I organized the photographs into piles, trying to piece together a timeline of Anna May's short life. For the first time, it felt like she was more than just a mystery. She was a person, a mother, a daughter, a woman who had fought to keep her child despite the world standing against her. By evening, we had spread everything across the floor: letters, photos, newspaper clippings, even a few of Anna May's belongings that had been tucked away in boxes. A small hairbrush with missing bristles. A locket with a faded picture of a young man inside, Daniel, the boy she had loved. Mom picked up the locket and held it in her palm, her eyes distant. I used to wonder if he ever thought about me, if he ever cared what happened after he left. I reached for her hand. Maybe he did. But whether he did or not, she loved you enough to fight for you. And that's what matters. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she nodded. The next week was a blur of decisions. We reached out to the town's historical society, explaining that we had uncovered letters and photographs connected to a fire from decades ago. At first, they were hesitant. Old scandals weren't exactly what people wanted to revisit. But when we showed them the evidence, the letters, the dates, the photograph of Anna May, they couldn't deny the truth staring them in the face. Word spread quickly after that. At first, it was whispers, neighbors wondering why the old attic had been opened, what secrets were being unearthed. Then it grew louder. The local paper ran an article, "Family Secrets Revealed: The Truth Behind the 1954 Fire." For the first time in 70 years, Anna May's name was printed not as a cautionary tale, but as a victim of injustice. Some people resisted the truth. They didn't want to believe that the man they had admired, my great-grandfather, could have been responsible for something so horrible. They said we were tarnishing his memory, disrespecting the dead. But others believed. Others nodded with tears in their eyes, saying they had always suspected there was more to the story. The town was divided, but Anna May's name was spoken again. And that was enough. One evening, after the article came out, Mom and I sat on the porch of Grandma's house, the air heavy with summer heat. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and the cicadas sang their endless song. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" I asked quietly. Mom looked at me, her eyes shining. "I think she'd be proud of you. You gave her a voice again. You gave me the courage I never had." I swallowed hard, emotion thick in my throat. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. The weight of the secret was still there, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. It was something I carried with pride, not shame. That night, I went back into the attic one last time. I stood among the boxes, the letters, the dust that had once felt suffocating but now felt almost sacred. I pulled the cord on the light bulb, casting a dim glow over everything, and whispered into the silence, "I know who you are now, and I'll never let them forget again." The attic didn't answer, but somehow, I felt heard. In the weeks that followed, life slowly settled back into routine. School started again, my mom returned to work, and the world kept moving. But I was different. We were different. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw Anna May in my features, not just my mom. Every time I heard my mom laugh, I thought about how her mother must have laughed the same way once. I had lost the illusion of a perfect family, but in its place I had gained something stronger: the truth. And with it, the knowledge that even when families try to bury their past, the past always finds a way to rise. For years, Grandma, my great aunt, had told me to stay away from the attic. And for years, I listened. But now I understood. The attic wasn't just a place of secrets. It was a place of inheritance. A place where my family's pain lived, waiting for someone brave enough to open the door. And when I did, I found not just tragedy, but strength. Because Anna May's story didn't end in fire. It lived on in my mom. It lived on in me. And now, it would live on in everyone who heard the truth.